We're researching a painting by Goya entitled La Dolorosa, or The Lady of Sorrows, and it's a portrait of our Virgin, and she's depicted with a halo, as you can see on this picture. And this particular canvas has been folded and taken out of the stretcher, so it's got paint loss in some places. However, the face is extraordinarily beautiful, and I want you to notice the detail of her very full lips, her very straight nose with the wide bridge and the eyebrows set far apart, and then her beautiful hands, and in her right hand she's holding either a cross or a scepter up to her left shoulder. Now we're going to go to a larger photograph. This is the larger photograph, and it shows the fold marks in the canvas and the portions that have been cut away from the stretcher. And it also shows the full view of her halo, and then going down to her blue robes, and the background, which seems to be a landscape type setting. She has on a rose-colored gown with the blue cloak over it, and then the brown mantle wrapped around her head. Next, I want to show you the picture after it has been restored. This is the same portrait after it's restored, and you can see the fold marks are no longer in the canvas. The paint has been filled in, the missing areas. The color is somewhat deepened, which may be just in the photograph. In the background are the crosses on the hill, which accounts for the title, Our Lady of Sorrows. And you can still see the accentuated bottom lip, the straight nose without a bridge, and the eyebrows spaced far apart. Next, I'll show you an earlier sketch that Goya did, which seems to be the same model. These are two sketches in red chalk that Goya did for their drawings for Angel's Head, and they were done early in his career, probably before 1770, and they were either done in Italy or when he came back to Madrid. They're both, one is in the Prado, the other one is in Madrid, but notice again the full lower lip, the straight nose, the wide bridge, and here it's more pronounced. You see the straight nose, the wide bridge, the eyebrows set far apart, and the very full lips of the other model. So we can very assuredly say that this is the same model that he used for the painting of the Virgin in the La Dolorosa. The next picture shows the same angle. This is a detail of one of the frescoes which Goya did. This was early in his career in the 1770s. It was painted for the Cathedral of El Pilar in Saragossa. And if you'll notice very carefully, with her head tilted up, as in our painting, she's got the same full lower lip and the straight nose with a wide bridge. Even though there's a veil over it, you can see it's the same model. Next, we'll show you a painting in color. This is a painting by Goya of the Holy Family from 1774. It's an oil on canvas, and it's in the Prado in Madrid. And if you'll notice, the Madonna has the same straight nose with the wide bridge and the full lower lips as the other paintings do, so we can assume that this is the same model. And several of the sources have mentioned that this particular scene, that they attribute the model as being Josepha, the wife of Goya, and he married Josepha in 1773, which would be a year before this portrait was painted, and probably a year or two after the other sketches were done for the frescoes in the Cathedral of El Pilar. It would seem then that he had known her before, and that he used her for the model before and after he married her. This is another detail of the fresco in the Basilica of El Pilar in Saragossa, which was attributed to 1779 to 80, and it shows the same face with the wide-bridged nose and the very full lips as his other sketches. Next we have another picture. This is a painting of St. Barbara, and it's in a private collection in Madrid. It's an oil on canvas, and if you'll notice, it has the same model. Notice the straight nose with no bridge and the wide space between the eyes as the others. There's another painting using the same model that's lost right now. It's entitled A Portrait of St. Anne. So he must have used the same model for not only the Virgin, but also some of the saints that he did at that period. Next. This is another one of Goya's frescoes in which he used the same model, and she's right in the very center, but it's more difficult to see this because this fresco was very badly restored in the 19th century, and so some of it has been painted out. But it shows that he used her for a number of his first commissions. Next. This is another picture of the Virgin from the same early period, but 1774, probably the year after he and Josepha were married. In this one, she's impossible to not notice that she's got the same straight nose, the wide space between her eyebrows, and the very full lips. It's the same model as used for the La Dolorosa that we are looking at. This particular subject or model probably shows up in over 20 of the paintings he did from the 1770 to about 1795, and even later in his life, the last painting he did shows sort of the influence of this same woman on his painting. I don't know for sure if it's the same model, but I'll show you that next. This is another painting, a detail from the allegory of the city of Madrid, which was painted in 1810. Josepha would have been much older in real life, but he's using the same model that he used for his paintings of the Virgin. The fact that he was so attached to these paintings leads us to believe that this painting of La Dolorosa probably remained in his own collection. And he writes to his friend Zapata right after he's married that he doesn't need very much furniture for his first home, but a table and a chair and a bed and his Virgin of El Pilar. And that may be a reference to his wife, if she was indeed the model for all of these virgins. Another time, in another description of a letter to Zapata, he is talking about religion, and he talks about his feelings about religion depend on his Virgin of El Pilar, which again, you can interpret in a different way if you think of it as being his wife, Josepha. Now I have another one to show you of his friends. This is a portrait of his friend Martin Zapata, who was his friend from childhood, and he began writing letters to him soon around the period of 1770s when he was describing his work for the Virgin of El Pilar. He and Martin Zapata were friends until Martin's death in 1803, and this is a portrait which Goya did of him in 1790, and he's reading a letter from Goya. And you can see the lettering on the paper in front of him. It is a letter from Goya. This is a portrait of his brother-in-law, and it was done right after his death, so it's sort of a death portrait. Actually, it's believed that he painted it from a self-portrait, which Francisco Goya did of himself. There was a very interesting relationship here that began when Goya was only 17 years old, and he went to Madrid and he studied with Francisco Goya. It doesn't mention what Josepha was doing at that time. She would have been 16 when he was 17, and lived in the same house because Francisco was her guardian. Their parents had died and left them orphans, and he was the eldest brother. The other brother, Ramon, was also an artist, and they painted together on many of the frescoes in the chapels, and I believe that this is the reason that Goya probably took great pains to sign his canvases with his own name and initials and date in miniature, because it probably was, there probably was some competition there, and he was probably afraid his brother-in-laws would use his works and submit them for commissions. Soon after this painting is after he died. Soon after that, Goya's wife died in 1812. This is a painting of Feliciana by Francisco Goya. So it would be, Francisco Bayo. So it would be a portrait of the niece of his wife, who was Francisco's sister, and it's titled on the bottom that it's a portrait of La Francisciana, and it's in the Prado in Madrid, and I don't know the date on that painting, but it's obvious that it's the same girl as the next painting we'll show you. This is a painting that's entitled Portrait of a Lady with a Fan, and it's in the Louvre in Paris. It was painted around 1806 to 1807, and it's obvious, if you consider the picture of Feliciana, that this is the same girl, because notice that she has the heavy eyebrows, she has the long nose, and it has sort of a turned tip at the end and the full lips. She does have some resemblance to her aunt in that they both have the long nose without a bridge, but her eyebrows aren't as far apart, and her nose at the tip is definitely different. This is a painting from Sotheby's catalog of May of this year, 2004. It's entitled A Portrait of a Lady, and it's attributed to the circle of Francisco de Goya, even though in the literature, in two different sources, it was attributed to Goya, and it was in a private collection. And I believe that this is the same woman. It's his wife's niece, Feliciana. And you can tell, remember the same straight nose, but it has a definite tip on it, and the same full lips. She's probably a little older in this portrait, but I believe it's the same model. And it's really too bad, because if it would have been attributed to Goya as it was originally, would have brought much more money at auction. This is a portrait of Goya's grandson, Mariano, and it was done in 1812, about the same time that his wife Josefa died. And this child is so attractive that Goya wrote to his friend Zapata that when he went down the street with him, people across the street would stop and look at him and admire him because he was so beautiful. On this picture you can see the same very, very full lips that seem to run in that family. And it's interesting that he probably inherited those both from his mother and from his grandmother and his aunt. This is a painting entitled A Woman Reading a Letter, and it was painted in 1812, about the same time that Josefa died, and you can see it's his same model for the Virgin that he used for this painting. You'll notice she has the wide bridge, straight bridge on her nose, and the wide space between the eyebrows. It's interesting that he continued to use that model even though his wife was probably quite old at that time. It's interesting that that model of his wife as the Virgin stayed in his head, because this is a painting that's done toward the end of his life when he was blind and sick and he could hardly paint, and it's described as he painted this picture with rags in his hands instead of a brush. It's from 1827, and it's entitled The Milkmaid of Bordeaux, but it's obviously the same model of the love of his life. And you can see she has the straight nose, the full lips, the heavy eyebrows, the same model that he used for the Virgin. Before the marriage of his son his son Xavier, in 1805, he painted he did miniature drawings of the entire family, the entire wedding party, his son's fiancée, her family, sisters and brothers, and etc. And this is a painting, drawing, I should say, of Josepha from the side in 1805. This would have been 7 years before she died. And it shows it's not very flattering. It's an elderly woman who's obviously gained a lot of weight. It's reported she had 20 children, although only one survived. And this